am the resurrection and the life, says the Lord. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will never die. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to the Lord.
Now a man was ill, Lazarus, from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who had anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and dried his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was ill. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, saying, Master, the one you love is ill. When Jesus heard this, he said, This illness is not to end in death, but it is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, Let us go back to Judea. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just trying to stone you, and you want to go back there? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If one walks during the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of the world. But if one walks at night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. He said this, and then told them, Our friend Lazarus is asleep, but I am going to awaken him. So the disciples said to him, Master, if he is asleep, he will be saved. But Jesus was talking about his death, while they thought that he meant ordinary sleep. So then Jesus said to them clearly, Lazarus has died. And I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe. Let us go to him. So Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go to die with him. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, only about 2 miles away. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him. But Mary sat at home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, Your brother will live. Martha said to him, I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if they die, will live. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord. I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary secretly, saying, The teacher is here and is asking for you. As soon as she heard this, she rose quickly and went to him. For Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still where Martha had met him. So when the Jews who were with her in the house comforting her saw Mary get up quickly and go out, they followed her, presuming that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her weeping, he became perturbed and deeply troubled and said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Sir, come and see. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind men have done something so that this man would not have died?" So Jesus, perturbed again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay across it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the dead man's sister, said to him, "Lord, by now there will be a stench. He's been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd here I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. So Jesus said to them, "Untie him and let him go." Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what he had done began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
For the third consecutive Sunday, we have listened to a very, very long gospel passage. And these gospels that the church gives to us on the third, fourth, and fifth Sundays of Lent are significant, not only because of the story they told, but also because of what they do. They have a common link, because in each one of these gospel passages for the past 3 Sundays, we have a self-revelation by Jesus of who he is. If you remember 2 weeks ago, we heard the story of Jesus speaking to the Samaritan woman at the well. And during their encounter, she said to him, "I know that the Messiah is coming, the one called the Christ." And Jesus replied to her, "I am he, the one speaking to you." And last weekend, we read the story of Jesus healing the man born blind. And after he had been healed, Jesus asked him, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And the healed man replied, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" And Jesus once again says point blank, "You have seen him. The one speaking with you is he." And now in today's gospel passage, Jesus, in his dialogue with Martha, the sister of Mary and Lazarus, tells her that her brother will rise. And she replies that she knows that he will rise in the resurrection of the last day. Then once again, Jesus reveals to her who he is by saying, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if they die, will live. And everyone who believes in me will never die." And John tells us, many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what Jesus had done began to believe indeed that he was the one. But I think as we hear today's gospel about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, there are 2, I think, important words that we might sometimes overlook. And those words very simply are, Jesus wept. This little detail that John includes in his narrative may seem a bit puzzling, as we might wonder why Jesus would weep when he knows he's about to raise this dead friend of his back to life. But when he wept, Jesus made it clear that through him, God has come from heaven to earth to enter fully into our life, including our pain. That God is not detached and aloof. God, in a sense, weeps with us. Next Sunday, Palm Sunday, the last Sunday of Lent, we will hear the proclamation of the Passion of Jesus Christ, which is a reminder that God takes on human flesh and suffers and dies on the cross. Not that we might not suffer and die, but rather that our suffering, our death, might be like his. Jesus' sorrow at the death of his friend Lazarus was no less real than our own sorrow in the face of the death of a loved one. Jesus shows us that indeed he is not just fully divine, but also fully human. Whenever someone dies very suddenly, or a child dies, or a young person dies, or someone dies from a terrible lingering disease, we often probably find ourselves asking, how can God let something like this happen? Or, why doesn't God do something about this? Or is God really there? Of course, these are age-old questions that test our faith. Questions that we can never totally give a satisfactory answer to. All we know is that God is not always God, the way we would be God if we were God. But I think with these words, Jesus wept. John is telling us that when we suffer the loss of someone so suddenly or so young, indeed, God does weep with us. For even God's own Son was not spared the pain of suffering and death. For just as God was with Jesus every step of the way through his passion and death, so too God walks every step of the way with us to raise us up when our life is filled with the cross of pain or suffering or loss. And so as Jesus asked Martha, so too Jesus may ask us, do you believe this? Jesus did not raise Lazarus back to life just to spare Martha and Mary the pain of the loss of their brother, but to demonstrate to them and to us that indeed he has power over all things, even death itself. For he is the resurrection and the life, and it's through him that we can find hope in the midst of our own suffering and loss, even in the face of death. When we are sometimes bound up in the darkness of the tomb of our doubt and anger and fears, the good news is that Jesus can unbind us and take away the stone so that we can see the light of hope that his own death and resurrection gives to us. Yes, there's only one way to put it. Death stinks. But today's gospel reminds us that death does not have the final word. God has the final word. And with God, the final word is not death, but life. And this is the joy of the gospel that our Holy Father, Pope Francis, so often speaks of. And this is the truth of the gospel that Lent calls us to believe in now and every day of our lives. It is this truth that death does not have the final word that enables us to proclaim with joyful hope, even in the face of death, that God is good all the time. All the time.
God is good.